You're watching Cable 2.
15. 10 away. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening and welcome to the September 24th Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education meeting. I am Shay Woodbury, Board Chair, and I appreciate your attendance and say good evening to our viewers on Cable 2. Will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and also our invocation? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray.
Tonight we come together asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in the meaningful discussions, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of this community. Guide us as we make decisions that will affect the students, staff, and faculty of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. Amen.
Before we get to the first item on our agenda, I would just like to take a privilege of the chair, so bear with me, to recognize a great champion in our community, a fighter for education who passed away last week, Dr. Carlton Eversley. He was very instrumental in my life in influencing me to be here to also try to fight on behalf of our children. One of the things that we heard about him was his love for reading and books. And the very last time I spoke with him, we were together at an event. He said, Ms. Woodbury, you got to get civil rights unionism. That will help you to become more wise about how to lead this community because it chronicles the history of Winston-Salem. So I would also send that message on to you. Civil rights unionism is a good book to read. So with that being said, I will go to the first order of business, which is our agenda review. I think we need to amend the agenda to add the Dana Finieves contract to our action item.
So I move to approve the agenda with the addition.
Second.
Any question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right. The next item is our public comments on agenda items. At this time, we will hear public comments on the agenda items. Please know we reserve this time to hear comments only on the items that are on tonight's agenda, either for action or discussion. Direct your comments to me as the chair and know that while we are not able to respond, I may direct you to a staff member that can answer your question when appropriate. We do ask that you be respectful, kind, and know we cannot talk about sensitive and private student or personnel information in this public setting. While we hope it doesn't, should the comments become personal attacks or contentious or otherwise disruptive, I reserve the right to end the comment period. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and if you have more to share, I always know you can contact us directly through email. First, we will have Lillian Podlock.
Hello, my name is Lillian Podlock, and I'm speaking in regards to the curriculum committee meeting, and I'm a member of Hate Out of Winston. During that meeting, Dr. McKnight discussed how the community effort for more and better quality Black history has been ongoing since the early 90s. I hope that you saw the video of people marching in the street in Philadelphia for Black history, and I hope you felt how important this is. I hope you watched the video that we sent you of students from Philadelphia, over 200 students giving written and spoken testimony at their state legislature for a mandatory Black history class, and you felt how important this is. I hope you watched the students from your school system, middle schoolers and high schoolers, stand here, being televised, being watched, and witness them and really witness what they were saying. We are calling for a stronger infusion curriculum. That means accountability, training, funding, as well as a standalone Black history class to be required for graduation. I hope you know that Black history is uniquely important important to the shaping of this country, this hemisphere and our economy. It's not just about seeing yourselves in the curriculum, although that's really important. It's about Black students seeing themselves in the curriculum because the development of this country came and comes at their expense. Because when Black students don't know their history, there are impacts on their mental health and well-being. When white students don't know Black history, this leads to racism and white supremacist violence. By all means, incorporate Latina history, Indigenous history, women's history into the curriculum, but don't use that to deflect. We need Black history, and we need all of those other histories as well. And we can't, when we're talking about Latina history, we cannot talk about the history of Latin America without talking about Black history and the way that that was shaped. And Black history opens up the conversation about race and about class that students are already having. Because they're looking around, or looking at the world around them, and they're already having those conversations. We need to equip teachers who weren't taught this information. We need to equip them to teach as well, so students can have those conversations and be equipped to live in this world. We know that teachers by and large throughout the country are enthusiastic about teaching Black history. That was in the state of Black history in U.S. schools and society, which was given out at the curriculum committee meeting. They are enthusiastic, but it was found that of those teachers, between 1 and 2 classes on average, or 8 to 9% of classes were actually focused on Black history, which is insufficient. And so there is this national mismatch, so forgive us for being skeptical, and forgive us for wanting more and pushing for more. Connecticut and California are both considering mandatory Black history classes. There have been pushes in New York and Michigan. The need for this is a conversation we're having as a nation. Let us be a cutting-edge school district. Let us show the impact of Black history on achievement, the mental health of our students, racially motivated violence. Let's make a legacy. You all can do it. We can do this together.
Thank you. Next we have Mr. Al Jabbar.
Good evening, Board Chair
Good evening.
Woodbury. Good evening, fellow board members. Good evening, Superintendent Harrison. In building the grounds today, there was a little conversation around Ashley. I want to share with this board again. There are some discussions around other projects that we're looking at to improve some conditions for other schools. But let it be known that we would not support anything before Ashley. Let it be known. My desire is for the children at Reynolds and the children at Parker to have facilities that's compatible with West Forsyth, Mount Tabor, and the other so-called elite schools. But let me make it clear. Ashley, I want you to keep that in your brain. Ashley. Whatever it takes. And don't give us some information that's contrary. I was talking to the assistant city manager, Tanya, but at any rate, the money that they're trying to get for the project, the $30 million, is exclusively for the Cleveland project area, exclusively. Now, there's a possibility that in that process, we could find, they could find a need to have a school built. But let it be known that none of this impacts building a new Ashley. We have been waiting and waiting and waiting. The city of Winston-Salem and the county, I can't understand why we can't work out land deals. We work out all other county deals, but we can't work out land deals. Again, Ashley, before anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Mr. Ricky Johnson.
of the African American history class being mandated. So I've been working with the local organizing committee for the past almost 4 years. So it seems we've been getting the same responses as far as being given a runaround, pushed to the side, and it seems to me that this issue has been thrown around like a political football at the expense of meeting some of these other black and brown kids. We've gotten responses in some of the meetings from the decision makers, which are still troubling to me. One former member who's on the board, who shall remain nameless, told us through email that if those kids want to learn that history, they can learn it in college. I think she failed to realize that some of them don't get there. Another comment from former superintendent who's also no longer with us, she told us that if that was mandated, some of them wouldn't be able to comprehend some of the stuff. So that brings on another issue about why they aren't sufficient to read or comprehend, in her words, the information given. Also, there's two things that were mentioned in the curriculum committee meeting, I believe last week. One of which that was, one of the responses we got a lot over the years is that it's state regulations as far as the history requirement, but we contacted some of the state representatives, or one state representative, she sort of said, of course, it's in the hands of the school board, the local school board, to actually vote to make that mandatory. The second thing I want to point out is the push for data. So over the years, we specifically, I have provided some of the studies and some of the meetings to the school board members that met with us. Now, were they read? I don't know. I seriously doubt it, but they were provided because I know it was provided. I want to provide it. Last, I think, if we're looking for data that produce results, we're looking outside of systems. I don't think we necessarily have to look outside because I think we're looking for culturally responsive strategies to help black kids. I believe in 2001 with Dr. Fields, with the Latham one, his program produced results. And I think if we use that model, it would be beneficial for black and brown kids in our school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alfred Harvey.
Good evening, Chairwoman Woodbury, distinguished board, Dr. Harrison. It is indeed a pleasure to stand before you today. So many things just running through this little brain of mine, but I came here to talk about buildings and grounds and to talk about Ashley School, briefly. And I was so shocked and amazed and pleased when I looked back and I saw my good friend Dudley Watts walking in. And if you recall, some time ago, I told you all about a meeting that the 14th Street Elementary School alumni had, when Dudley Watts said that we could fast track school. Fast track, I'm going to say it again, fast track. That means that we didn't have to wait. We don't have to wait till 2022, 2023. We could fast track a school. We even talked about how much it would cost to build an elementary school in East Winston that would emphasize math and science. We talked about it at our little meeting. The only reason I don't have it with me tonight is driving a different car. And so that information is in another bag in a different car. But I say to you, don't forget about Ashley. Don't forget about what we need for that community. Because it is important. Just like we voted on a new school board member tonight, let's not forget that we owe the kids of East Winston, District 1, we owe them the same things that we give other kids throughout the city, throughout the county. Right now, we're not doing that. failing. We're failing. We need to do better. If we can't do better, then I guess the next election, we'll try to do better. We'll try to get better board members, more responsive board members that will heed our call for fairness, for honesty, and for equity. Because I just witnessed something tonight that was already an established fact. And that was who the new board member would be. I don't even know if you called anybody else. I know somebody else applied, wanted to do it.
Mr. Harvey, you gonna talk about?
I'm gonna talk about this. I'm gonna talk about this.
Talk about the,
I'm talking about Ash.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I'm talking
okay,
about.
I just wanted to get you back
That's what
on
I'm talking about,
topic.
Ash. Because, you see, those same board members that we had in the past ignored Ashley. You just let me tire what I want to tire, not what you want me to tire. Ashley, we need a new school. And we need a school built not just haphazardly. Someone told me about the new pastry, so my wife and I decided we're going to go over there and check it out.
You asking for another minute?
I'm asking you for another 2 minutes. So you interrupted me.
I'm just trying to-
I want my 2 minutes.
Okay.
I want my 2 minutes. We need to do the right thing about those kids at Ashland. We don't need to hold them out. I'll be through with this. You don't have to rush me. We don't have to do that to those kids. Let's do a better job. You have a responsibility to all the kids in Forsyth County, not just a few. Not just a few. Let's do something for all the kids. Then we talking about doing something for all these other schools. Then I'm going to sit down because 51 years ago, North Forsyth received a new wing and a new gym. 51 years ago. Dilapidated, run-down school. Seems like everywhere black kids attend in mass numbers, schools are dilapidated and run down. That's a fact. And that's a fact that this board has to live with. I support this board, but I don't support slothfulness, and I don't support anybody that won't stand up and do the right thing. Thank you for the extra minute and 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Mr. Allen Daniel.
Good evening, Chair Woodbury, members of the board, and Dr. Harrison. A couple of things I would like to address. First being your plan to approve a referendum supporting the sales tax increase. I spoke in opposition to that at the county commissioners meeting for one reason. There is absolutely no guarantee that that money will be spent on schools. No, they can't guarantee that. The next board could decide that they want to spend the money some other way. If you don't believe that, think back to the lottery. That was going to be the next be-all, end-all to cure the problems with school buildings, right? Where are we? Now they're saying, well, if you give us a sales tax, we'll take back the property tax increase. Which tells me that the county has absolutely no intention of raising the percentage of the budget that goes to education. If you all support what the county commissioners are doing, you're supporting the status quo. It is not your job to tell the county how to raise money. The job of this board is to pass a budget that will give every student in the district the best chance for a quality education. It's up to the county commissioners to figure out how to raise that money. I urge you not to put forth a referendum, because what they're looking for is a scapegoat. Oh, the school board wants us to raise taxes. The citizens will decide. But it's going to be a big fat lie when 4 years down the road, you all support a tax to increase teacher pay, and the economy goes south, and there's no money. The second thing I want to say
has to do with the low-performing schools. I've mentioned the name Gildo Ray Elementary School over and over again. In I believe it was 98, they had 50% poverty and 30% proficiency. Last year, they were recognized as one of the best performing schools in the state of Washington. Their poverty had increased to 95%. But you know what? So had their proficiency. They didn't spend a dime. First thing they addressed is their behavior problem. A new action ain't going to fix the problems at Ashland. You can put all those kids in a new school. You don't change the culture. You don't put a bunch of straight-A students in on top of them like you do at Haynes, like you do at Brunson, to call those schools C when they're F. That's all you do. It's all in the world you do. You dump a bunch of straight-A students on top of an F school, C school. You don't have to worry about that. I'll be back later to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Next, we have Barbara Carrington.
Good evening, board members, and Dr. Gerson. I'm reading a statement from Miranda Jones. She's unable to be here, so I'll have to speak at the next meeting. So basically, she said, as a Black woman educator, I've been on a quest to help make African American studies a mandatory class here for the last 3+ years. For me, this is personal, because I teach special education. The students I see here are largely Black and brown without knowledge of self, knowledge of culture, or knowledge of a brilliant Black past. I've been asked to focus on eradicating their deficits, but no mention of culture as a factor in boosting their self-esteem, their self-efficacy, and their sense of cultural pride. This is problematic. I find myself wondering if by chance this class is approved, who among my colleagues will be teaching the courses? The reality is that this noble and glorious profession is dominated by white women and white men. Many are well-intentioned, but that doesn't mean that they, or even teachers who look like me, can teach this history from an asset perspective. Will the teachers make assessments asking about working from stereotypical perspective, thinking that it's synonymous with all the Black culture? Will these teachers, like the alleged teacher in Freeport, Long Island, ask students to write something funny about slavery? In a district that says equity is a core value, what will we all do? How will you ensure oversight, accountability, and progress monitoring? How will these teachers be evaluated? Teachers of African American Studies need the knowledge, disposition, affinity, and capacity to teach this subject. They must start on the mother continent of Africa. Name the kingdom, name the people, the Don, pronounced Don, the Ashanti, Zulu, Husa, Yoruba, Berbers, the Moors. Discuss the culture prior to the European contact and the white gaze. This is the African standard by which teachers are evaluated. It's this standard that states we educators work to dismantle stereotypes. Your decision in this matter gives us the tools. If you decide not to grant the class or implement the aforementioned teachers, my community has no choice but to let that determine how they vote. Thank you. And in the spirit of Ancestor Bible Reverend Dr. Colton Eversley, Miranda M. A.D. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Hirsch.
Excuse me, I'm a traveling educator. I have no school, except the school of hard knocks and learning as I go. My name is Sally Hirsch. I'm here for the Coalition for Equity in Public Education, which is involved in your Climate, Culture, and Equity Committee, among other things. And I'm here to support the African American class and infusion curriculum of all cultures. So I have so many things to say, and let's see if I can get them out. Without understanding African American history, we simply cannot understand this country. How do we count the ways? The first slaves that came over with rice in their pockets, in their countries, or whatever it was, to feed themselves. That's a history that Old Salem is teaching. Are we teaching it in our schools? Do you know? I don't know. Without African Americans coming to this country, where would we be? We had no labor. We had some white labor, but we had Native Americans that were being decimated, dying from disease, a genocide occurring. So we had to have people to work here. Without understanding African American history, how can we understand the movement to the west to stop Spain from coming up into the country? We had to have people being fed, working farms, in the industries. It's all part of the story. It's part of everyone's story. It's part of every race that's on this continent. It's part of their story. So we have to have African American history taught in the schools, or we do not understand our country. It's labor, it's farm labor, it's industrial labor, and that will tell the story of all people. So, farmers, industrialists, that was what I connected with Carl and Eversley on so many years ago when I worked with him to support the Infusion Project. And I had gone to see By a Black Hand. Incredible, an incredible play about brilliant African-American inventors. And I wrote a letter about it to the editor, and I sent it to people that I was working with, like Carlton. Carlton put it up in his church and phoned me and said, "I've got your letter up on the wall of my church. It's beautiful." Can I have a minute? Yeah. So I really connected with him on the inventors. How can we not teach that? I don't understand. I was in the theater with those children, and I raised the question. I said, when are we going to get this film or this play to our legislators and get our textbooks changed? The entire theater went up. All the kids rising out of their seats, screaming. Is it in our schools? Do we see that play now? Does anybody know? Okay. Anyway. So, without African American history, we can't tell all these stories. And I want to be a resource. I've read all kinds of books. Here's a book by a man named Bill Dow. Does anybody know who this is? Does anybody know who Bill Dow is? He started the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association and worked for the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. We need that book in our schools. We need this book right here, Margarito's Forest. It's about a man in Guatemala that created a forest that saved his daughter when the village was destroyed by the junta. And then some of the people that left that village came up to the United States and found sanctuary in the 1980s. So that's an important book. We need to tell that story. I've got a book on 101 school jokes. That's a good book. Let's share that one. The global forests. We've got climate change we're dealing with. Ayurvedic cooking. Here's a wonderful culture that we don't talk about or celebrate, and it has so much to offer us, India.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch.
The last one I'm going to share, and then I'll be done, is this man, Mike Oler. He wrote Earth-Sheltered Solar Greenhouse book. You can dig a hole in the
Next,
ground.
we have
and
Katie
have a
Stone and
greenhouse.
Lee. I'm sorry, Ms. Hirsch. Thank you.
Black history is absolutely essential to all these stories.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Hairston. Tonight I'm speaking as an individual. And I first want to start out with giving a shout out to Brett Campbell bunch of stuff at the website this week. He's always so helpful and responsive, so just wanted to highlight how good he is. Second, I wanted to offer my support for the classified personnel and the other employees in the school district. I know there's discussion tonight about teacher supplements and funding for that, but I really want to highlight the folks that are driving our buses, cooking the meals, picking up my son's trash every day that he drops them along out of his pocket all the time. All of those folks really are what make the school go around through a lot of the hard times during the day, teacher assistants, people in the office, those folks, and they shouldn't be having to do food stamps or WIC or their kids qualifying for free or reduced lunch when they're in a career and they're working in our school system. So I really want to encourage you all to focus on how we can find funding for other personnel in the district, not just teachers, and to use your influence at the city level, at the county level, at the state. We have two former, well, a board member and a superintendent who are now at the state level, just recently, in the last few years. Use your leverage and use your power to work on that, especially as we go through elections in 2020 and hopefully get a new GA that will hopefully be more supportive of public education. I also wanted to state my support for a more comprehensive curriculum, like she said, that teaches the true history of Black, Native, Latinx, Asian, and queer people in this country, and the true history of whiteness and white supremacy in this country as well. We can't do one without the other. And finally, I wanted to push back on the idea that students at Ashley or at any school are incapable of learning or improving or growing academically. I fundamentally believe that every child is capable of that, given the right resources and given good teachers, good schools, and good curriculum, and good support for them. So I feel really strongly about that, and we can support every student in this school system, and it's not just a discipline issue.
Thank you. Mr. King, please.
Good evening, Chair Blueberry, school board members, and Dr. Harrison. I have been here so much, so many times. I think if I were to just turn around and go back and sit down right now, you would all already know what I have to say, because I've said it so many times. Ms. Burke, I really appreciate the work that you're doing with the curriculum committee. I have one ask, though. I was hoping that there was some way that there could be questions asked during the course of the meeting. I know there was a disturbance in one of the meetings, and I don't know if that was the reason that it was caused, or the cause of not being able to ask any questions after the meeting. But I would appreciate if you would think that over, and there was some kind of way to possibly make that happen. Ricky Johnson mentioned that the information that we received from the state, as far as what can happen from these superintendents' point of view as far as making class mandatory. The information was that can happen. She has the authority to do that. As a matter of fact, we were sitting in a meeting with the former superintendent, and I asked her that very question. She said yes, she can make it happen. And that came directly from the state. It's nothing that we made up. The presentation that Dr. McKnight gave, I thought it was pretty thorough, but there was so much information. I think she only targeted one city that's actually doing African American history, and that was the city of Philadelphia. The thing about it, I just Googled this information, and there's a lot of information that we have that we've collected from the times that we've been here. Arkansas, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Mississippi, Rhode Island. All of these states are mandating African American history in their states. And I'm wondering why it's so hard for this little small city to make something like that happen. In Texas, This is crazy. The new social studies textbooks barely address racial segregation, nor will they mention Ku Klux Klan, Civil War, or slavery as a whole. Now, these textbooks were revised. My point is that everybody seems like states are going out of their way not to teach African Americans. It seems that like that is exactly what's happening here. I would hope that somehow we can bring some finality to making the class mandatory. I don't know how often we can come here and say anything different, but I think something needs to happen. States are doing it. Some states have the best to do it. This is a small city, and this is a racist state. Something needs to happen. Not only in this state, states around the country.
Do you
Can you give me 2 more minutes? I read this online today, and this is from a former mayor. And he's saying many of our young people particularly have a sense of lack of identity, that I am just here. And he talked about once you begin to crack that theory and talk to these children. And I think this was happening with our black children. I know they come to school every day and they're basically being brainwashed with European history. And we wonder why these kids act that. And the first thing we want to do is put our kids on medication. I'm particularly talking about black children. First thing we'll do is put them on medication. We bring the parents in, and they're intimidated when they get here, when they get to the school. They see people in shirts and ties, so they're automatically intimidated. So they'll believe anything that person tells them about their child. The next thing you know, the child's on medication. Some of these things, I know we have 2 sisters that are teachers. They've been in the school system over 65 years combined. I couldn't believe some of the things that they were telling me until I started to substitute. Our children are in desperate need of knowing about themselves. I'm talking about the high school level as well. Hopefully something will happen out of this. We don't know when, but I think I know for a fact we're not giving up. I know some of you are in favor of it, some of you are not. You can almost tell the ones that are not. During the conversation in the curriculum meeting, the conversation just went completely off the rail. We were supposed to be talking about the African American history class and what we could possibly do to get that in the curriculum. But the conversation was totally off the rail. So I know for a fact that there are maybe 1 or 2 of you all that are in favor of it. And I think the majority of you are not. And I would really love to know. Hopefully when it comes to the floor, we can find out for sure who is and who's not in favor of it. Thank you.
Mr. Sam Ball.
Good evening, Chair Woodbury, members of the board, Dr. Harrison. I'm here tonight to speak about the referendum, the sales tax referendum. I was reading an article about Business Sense at one point, and general wisdom from when I was young, learning about how business works, is they say the customer's always right. The customer's always right. But this in particular was talking about Richard Branson. I believe he is the CEO of Virgin Mobile, and he kind of took an alternative approach. He said, well, the customer is not the most important thing. The most important thing is for you to take care of the people who are directly dealing with the customers. Because if you take care of your employees, then the employees will do a better job for the customers. So I kind of thought about that, and I decided to kind of apply that thinking to the way the school system works. Okay, if we think about who our customers are, the customers are the students, customers are the families. So if we spend all of our time saying the customer is always right, the customer is always right, we're completely missing out on the value of the people that are directly dealing with those customers, that are directly dealing with the families and the students on a daily basis. So I'm here to speak in support of the sales tax referendum because personally, I talk to classified employees and my certified staff as well. And I was here last year. I was here last year talking to a slightly different board about the need of increasing the supplements for teachers. The more I talk to my classified colleagues, the more I start to realize how little they make. I was talking to a classified employee from our district who makes $500 a month. Just 3 jobs. If we want people to take their job at the school system seriously, to come to my school or any other school and take their job seriously and do a good job without having to worry about what other jobs they have to go to, what other works they have to take care of, we need to make sure that they can support themselves with that job. So I'm asking you to support the sales tax referendum. I'm asking you to use the power that you have and not just say, oh, well, okay, the county commissioner's going to do whatever they want to with that money. No. We need to advocate, we need to push them to make sure that that money is coming to the public education system, that we are using it for the people that are helping our children be successful on a daily basis. And personally, I can't support people who are not supporting me and my colleagues in the work that we do, because I believe that this is the most important work there is to do. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Maya White.
Hello, my name is Maya White. I just wanted to speak about the curriculum period. I kind of piggybacking off of everybody else with African Americans being in history, but I believe it shouldn't just be in history. There are a lot of people that affected science, language, arts. Maya Angelou is not the only poet. Excuse me, I'm nervous and I've been here before. I noticed at my daughter's school, she's 12 years at Northwest now, but she went to Vienna Elementary. And I didn't speak up, I should have been, but I'm speaking up now. And I noticed that in her classes, the books that they would read, I'm like, well, I would always just notice, like, how come they never read books with black children or about Spanish children? My daughter, she's Puerto Rican and black, that, there are books with all types of different cultures that are just elementary school books. They're not just, just stories with different cultured children. And I think this is important for all children to know about. Right now, my daughter goes to Northwest, and children don't understand how she's Puerto Rican and black because she's so brown. And it's just like, and we're like, well, that's what you are. Your grandfather's Puerto Rican, and this is just your culture. And they look at her like, oh, look at your hair, and they question all these things because it's not something that they're used to seeing. It's not something that's being presented to them. And it shouldn't just be, up to parents. Well, it's also parents should teach things, but at the same time, this stuff needs to be put into the school system. And it needs to be everywhere. There's so many different black inventors, Hispanic inventors, Indian inventors, Native American. It goes across the board. It shouldn't just be, when they're being taught about Benjamin Franklin. That's another thing, Benjamin Franklin. There was a black man who created the filament of the light bulb. There's Nikola Tesla, who created, that's the reason why we have electricity going across the board. I mean, these are so many important people that are a part of our history, and it's not being taught. So to me, I think the curriculum period needs to be looked at as to what our children are being taught. I remember in elementary school for history specifically, my daughter has like a little newspaper pamphlet, and I'm like, what is this? A lot of it is washed down, and I'm like, this shouldn't be like this. A lot of stuff she would go over, and I would have to go in depth and like, no, this is how this is the reality of it. I just believe that there's way more history, way more science, way more language arts. There's so many different people that should be implemented into our curriculum that these children need to know about. I have 2 more minutes. That should be implemented into our history, or not history, just the curriculum period, excuse me. And I mean, like, to me, I feel like if this was a part of our curriculum, these children, they're maybe in a lower income school or area, that could be the one person. It could be an inventor or somebody, anybody, even if it's somebody new. they could spark their child's interest to change their whole world. And that's all you need sometimes is just one person. That's it. You just need one idea, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's just, like, I'm so amazed. Like, look at this person. I want to be like that. And sometimes it's because they don't see it. Maybe their parents can't do certain things at home, but it's the teacher who brings in this book and it gives them, oh wow, this astronaut did this, or, you know, anything. And it will take that person and look just like them. I want to be like that. And that changes everything that they do in school from here on in. And I just believe that the curriculum needs to be looked at and it needs to be changed across the board. Thank you.
Our next order of business is our discussion items. The first discussion item is the district's preliminary plan for local forming schools. Dr. Harrison will lead us in discussion about that.
Members of the board, Chairman Woodbury, thank you for an opportunity to share this district plan to improve local forming schools as required by our Department of Education. First of all, local forming schools, the State Board of Education, the rule indicates shall identify local forming schools on an annual basis. Local forming schools are those that receive a school performance grade of D or F and a school growth score of met expected growth or not met expected growth. So at this time, we have 8 schools that are labeled with an F, 20 with a D, and 21 that are considered local forming schools. And that's a little different than our what we call CSI schools or comprehensive school improvement schools. So as required, the statutory requirements are that I shall make recommendations to you all, the Board of Education, on retention, transfer, dismissal, or demotion of local forming school principals. And we're in the process of identifying those principals and those types of supports that are needed for principals. I'm actually, in addition to that, required to submit a preliminary plan to the Board of Education, our local Board of Education, for improving those schools. The local board, you have an opportunity between September 27th and October 22nd to approve, modify, and reject this plan. And so our plan throughout the next month prior to the 22nd in committee and regular board meeting is to bring those recommendations to you. And we'll send you a plan in advance. We started to work on that plan, but we will send you a plan in advance so that you can review and certainly give us feedback. We must submit the final plan to the State Board of Education within 5 days of your approval, and the window of time opens on the 31st. Schools will officially submit individual plans to the state, and that's beginning October 31st as well. Each local forming school is required to inform parents of local forming status in writing, and those letters will go out to parents. And so thus far, some of the things that, before we go to the next part, I'm proud to say is that all of our schools that fall in the D and F range, regardless of local forming identification or not, we've already been able to bring in those schools. It's been an entire day with their school improvement planning team, and that was a very successful process, having them review their data, look at their school improvement plans, and identify strategies for improvement. We had meetings with principals to determine next steps. Dr. Cato and the team from the structural superintendents and Dr. Niels are in the process of getting those plans in the InStar. We will look at those plans and monitor them regularly, not just the paper monitoring, but also the physical monitoring of the plan and the action steps taken. The Department of Public Instruction will review each plan and provide feedback, and that will go into our North Carolina STAR, our InStar. The local board shall consider recommendations made by the state board and amend plans and vote on approval. So as we go through this process, we will physically, our team will make those adjustments. We will get those plans posted on behalf of the Board of Education. The process that we used when we met with all our principals that we will continue to focus upon is first the needs assessment. Majority of the schools have had a comprehensive needs assessment They've been able to identify their strengths and weaknesses. We were very proud of the fact that principals and their teams were able to engage in conversation around data, next steps, and those types of things. We asked them to assess where they were as school teams, which objectives they wanted to work on. We worked on creating those action steps in our meeting, and then the monitoring team will be coordinated between our instructional superintendents. And those again will be district office folks going out to monitor the work at the schoolhouse. The monitoring team and supports will be tiered. So we will have monitoring of all schools regardless of their grade, but more intense monitoring will occur with our low performing schools. Every school is provided training on analyzing their data, conducting their needs assessment, looking at a root cause analysis, why their children failing to attend school on a regular basis, what's happening in literacy, what's happening in the math. We also work with them on setting real goals, SMART goals, measurable objectives. We then moved to work on the monitoring teams and the schedule, which we'll gladly provide in our plan. And our efforts are to collaborate with everyone around supporting our lowest performing schools. That concludes the overview of the presentation. We'll provide you with a more detailed plan. Schools are working on getting their improvement plans in the STAR or North Carolina STAR, and in October we'll bring forth the full plan for your approval. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I wanted you to review how does the state assign grades for our schools? So when something's called a D or F school, how is that decided?
So we'll ask Dr. Cato or Andrew, you want to come up? He'll go into detail with those metrics. Do you have so while it's coming up, 80% of the score on our test, in the course test, is an achievement score. So you take the number of students who are proficient, you multiply by 80%, and you get one metric. 20% is on growth. And so you'll take 20% of whatever your growth score is, add those two scores together and get a score. And I'll let them talk about the range once that is assigned. It's out of 100 points.
So, and part of my question, again, perhaps you can answer, Dr. Hurston, is that even if a school is growing its students very well, and so they enter school with perhaps a different readiness than other children, and you grow them, you still can indeed be, quote, a low-performing school.
Yes, we saw a lot of that with our exceeds growth schools. We saw lots of schools that exceeded their growth expectations. And those schools did not meet achievement expectations. So yes, we did see that.
And how common was that?
Let me have him, it was pretty common, but we'll let Andrew.
Yeah, Dr. Harrison's exactly right. The school performance grade is 80% achievement and 20% growth. Those achievement factors include the EOG scores, the EOC scores. At the high school level, there's also things like cohort graduation rate, the ACT, and the work keys. So that's 80% of the score. 20% of the score is growth, so you can not meet or exceed expected growth. There's a growth index. Below -2 is not meeting, above 2 is exceeding. So to be a low-performing school, that means you earned a D or an F, and you did not exceed expected growth. Okay, so if you do exceed...
If you net growth, you would not...
That's right. If you met or didn't meet and you were a D or F, you would be a low-performing school. But if you exceeded expected growth, you'd be removed from that list of low-performing schools.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So, I guess I don't have a question more so than a suggestion as a board member that, and I can appreciate what the state is doing by way of holding us accountable for low-performing schools, but I would like to see our school district hold ourselves accountable for our low-performing schools by identifying a low-performing schools policy that will make sure that we are very cognizant of some of the key elements that perpetuate low performing schools, like if you have so many of the staff that are lateral entry in first year. So if 60 to 70% of the staff at a school is 1 year lateral entry, that's going to impact performance. So in my mind, I would hope that the superintendent could lead the board in helping us to come up with policy that can help us move away, for one thing, from low performing schools, but to also just make sure that we're holding our district accountable for helping these low performing schools that have metrics that we can see and move towards as it relates to regressing the low performing schools out of that title.
Absolutely. Thank you.
The next discussion item is the curriculum committee report by board member Barbara Burke.
Good evening. The curriculum committee met on September 17th. There were 4 discussion items: an infusion update, high school graduation requirements, state and local, a mandatory African American history course, and iStation and iReady. Dr. Sam Mills, interim instructional superintendent, provided a handout of Winston-Salem Forsyth County's supplemental supports for grades K through 8 related to literacy and math. Dr. Mills explained that iStation was selected by North Carolina's Department of Public Instruction to support Read to Achieve Diagnostic and iStation. iStation will be used in grades K through 5 literacy, utilizing a digital path and teacher-directed lessons with Spanish option. Dr. Mills described iReady as individualized instruction with an online product with assessments to aid students to proficiency, and that schools can opt to pay for K-2 mathematics with Spanish option. The district will fund iReady, diagnostic, instruction, and teacher toolbox with Spanish option. Teacher toolbox is a virtual file cabinet of all K through 8th grade instructional resources that provide immediate access and detailed tutorials for students performing above, below, and on grade level. Additionally, Dr. Mills shared qualitative reading inventory is one of the literacy supports for middle school to address gaps for 6th grade, and will be implemented in 7th grade for the school year 2020-21, and in 8th grade for the school year 21-22. Mrs. Rebecca McKnight, Director of Social Studies, provided an infusion update. According to Mrs. McKnight, the Cultural Infusion Project historically began in the mid-1990s as part of multicultural education to help African American students see themselves in K through 12 curriculum. This provided teachers with a tool to use, but was not the core instruction. Mrs. McKnight explained that in 2017, the integration of African American Studies lessons moved from the Office of Multicultural Education to the Social Studies curriculum in order to give teachers more access to resources and tools. Since that time, African American Studies lessons and resources have been provided for K through 8th grade, as well as American History 1 and American History 2. Mrs. McKnight also discussed revisions that have been made for 8th grade. Specifically, inquiry lessons have been added to show how individuals and groups have influenced economic, political, and social changes in North Carolina and the United States. According to Mrs. McKnight, work is currently being done to build curriculum in grades 4 through 8 to include all groups and expanding to include multiple perspectives. She also advised that an 8th grade monitoring plan is in place to ensure that teachers are teaching the standards with fidelity. Dr. Hairston emphasized the importance of adopting textbooks that reflect more ethnic studies. Mrs. McKnight shared the current state multicultural course offerings and the 4 levels of multicultural curriculum reform. Next, Mrs. Angela Hubbard, Program Manager with School Counseling and Graduation Initiatives, shared information regarding high school graduation requirements, both state and local. She noted that graduation requirements for Winston-Salem Forsyth County are higher than that of the state. Mrs. Hubbard and Mrs. McKnight both jointly described the current social studies sequence for 9th through 12th grades, including the current enrollment for multicultural courses. They also compared Winston-Salem Forsyth County's graduation rate trend with the state from 2010 through 2019, reporting the difference of 0.3%, with Winston-Salem Forsyth County's graduation rate at 86.2% and the state's at 86.5%. Mrs. McKnight provided an update on research regarding the mandatory African American history course that we have been discussing. She discussed districts who have graduation mandates for students in Philadelphia Public Schools, Bridgeport, Connecticut Public Schools, and Los Angeles, and contrasting African American infusion in Port St. Lucie School District. Mrs. McKnight outlined the implementation challenges regarding mandatory African American history courses. She also contrasted the mandatory courses with the infusion approach to meet state requirements. Finally, new courses are brought to the October curriculum meeting. At the October curriculum meeting, a proposal at the next curriculum meeting for a mandatory African American course will be made at the next curriculum meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or discussions from any board members? The next item is the School Choice Special Committee report by Board Member Bramer.
The School Choice Committee met yesterday. Dr. Harrison provided a transportation overview report. More importantly, we decided to seek out a third-party, non-biased consultant to provide an overview of the school district and our choice plan as it is now. Forsyth Futures will continue to handle our survey. The new consultant will not change the content of the survey, but it will change the timeline. After that, we adjourn.
Any questions or discussion? Next, we have Board Member Crowley. She's going to go over the Buildings and Grounds Committee report.
Thank you. Buildings and Grounds met today at 4. We started with a security initiative update, which is funded through the 2016 bond and will involve the installation of cameras in schools. We also discussed North Forsyth High School's renovation, which is also part of the 2016 bond, as well as East Don Elementary School, that project's part of the bond, and because of a new requirement, we have to approve a commissioning agent for that project. And that did pass. We also were informed about the Verizon Innovative Learning Lab, which will be at East Forsyth Middle. They applied for this grant through Verizon, and the Principal Potee did that, and they will be getting a like a makerspace lab in the media center. We had a couple of announcements. We were getting Brunson and Ashley land updates in closed session. In November, the improvements to Haynes Park as it pertains to athletic fields for Wiley Middle School and Reynolds High School will be on the November Historic Review Committee on their agenda. And as far as the Meadowlark Traffic part, the October 1st at 6 p.m. there will be a meeting at Meadowlark Middle with the city to address that the traffic issues in front of Meadowlark Elementary and Meadowlark Middle on the road right out in front of those schools. It was also brought up by Chair Woodbury and Board Member Calvert Hayes, our minorities, women in business, their status. So we were looking at breakouts and what, and who we use as subcontractors, contractors and subcontractors for our projects. As far as how many minority contractors for women or for African Americans. And we also had a request to look at how those contracts are being awarded and breakdown as far as if the business is local or not local. And we then adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Next, we have Board Member Calvert Hayes with the policy amendment.
We decided to push that down a little bit and have more discussion later on, so it will be coming back up at the next meeting.
Our next order of business is action items. The first item is to consider approval of the district's preliminary plan for low-performing schools. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the Verizon Innovative Learning Lab.
Motion to approve.
Any discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the Easton commissioning agent contract.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the Achieve 3000 contracts for Carver High School and RJR Reynolds High School.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? The next item is to consider approval of the Equal Eyes Vision Services contract.
Second.
Discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the resolution in support of the local sales tax referendum.
Motion to approve.
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Yes, I would like to make a comment that I have served on the board for 13 years. This is the first time that the county commissioners have come up with a specific, doable funding source to raise our employees' salaries, and I enthusiastically support this. I am so grateful that our county commissioners are trying to find a revenue source that actually allows us to raise salaries. So I am very happy to approve this.
I'm still concerned that there is not any language in here that would prevent it from limiting the budget to just this percent and not to all the other monies they provide. This is very specific, and it does not say in addition to, it just specifically says for this piece.
So my understanding from, and we are very lucky that we have our county manager here in the audience in case anybody has questions, but my understanding about how things get put on the ballot is that the commissioners are really constrained by state law, what languaging can go on the ballot, and I personally find it troubling for us to make an assumption that the commissioners who have offered to try to increase pay for our employees are somehow not to be trusted to do something that they care about very much.
Again, I'm not saying this current commission, I'm saying it doesn't prevent anyone in the future from ever limiting it.
Right, but they are not allowed by statute. They are not allowed, am I correct, Mr. Watts? That by statute, they may not make the commitment that people keep saying, I'd like them to be able to make. The state law does not allow them to do that.
But does it also not allow us to actually levy any kind of a tax, but requires that the county commissioners levy?
We are not allowed to levy taxes. We are not a tax levying body.
That is not one of the things we're allowed to do. And my understanding from the commissioners, from lots of conversations with different commissioners, is that they very much would like to be able to come up with funding stream that allows us to actually do the thing that we have been asking for many, many, many years. And I would hope that we could all enthusiastically support them and partner with them and be glad that this is a way to get more money into the hands of our employees.
And if I may too, I think you have to look at the history that our county has for supporting education, and that we have to trust that that will continue as we move into the future. So thank you, Mr. Watts.
I just want to comment that a couple of months ago we had a resolution on the agenda, and then we removed it. I think we had some clarifying points and things we wanted to do. At that time, I was opposed not to putting this to the voters to do, but to the process. And so I appreciate the commissioners. And that process was for us to send a resolution before the county commissioners had a public hearing. And they did that, I guess it was last Thursday. So I appreciate them hearing the concerns that I had, and I think some other board members had about the process, and doing that, and then gives us the opportunity to then put a resolution forward. My couple of concerns, I do realize that state statute prohibits certain language on the ballot itself. I still would be in favor of city board members for the Board of Education and the county commissioners as we were campaigning for a quarter-cent sales tax to still make a personal pledge that while they are there in the seat, that has nothing to do with the state statute. I think that would give some maybe ease some concerns that maybe voters would have of how that would be used. So I still think that's a good idea as we move forward. And the only other concern that is in our resolution, it specifically says $13 million, but that was the best tax year that the county has had in about 10 years. So I think I just don't want that number to say that that's guaranteed. It will fluctuate. It will bring in whatever the sales tax brings in. And so that's just a clarifying point. Our resolution says that, but
Where on our resolution? I'm confused.
I thought it said 13. Didn't it say 13 million?
It says an estimated 13.
An estimated 13 million.
It's in the on the agenda page, but I did put that out of the resolution.
I'm looking
at the resolution itself, and I'm not seeing it.
Okay. Well, I saw it at one time.
It was in the previous version.
It was in one version. Okay, looking at. Okay, thank you.
The only question, I just want to clarify that this does include both our teachers and our certified employees.
And that will be on our end. So we have control of this. Yeah, that's our job, exactly.
Okay. I just needed some sort of clarification for our certified employees.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the curriculum associates contract.
Move to approve.
Second. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? The last item was added in the agenda review to approve the Dana Finyeves. Pardon me if I am mispronouncing that last name, because a Y and a V beside each other sometimes will confuse English learners. But it's the Dana Finyeves contract.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? So the question I have is, how will we resolve the I guess our current state of having an accountability office, but then needing to have contracted work for accountability?
So, Chair Woodbury, we have worked together over the past 2 weeks to bring a process whereby data informs instruction. That's sort of a gap for us. And what we discovered is that this product and this data is really needed so that we can take our end of course data, disaggregate it so it makes sense to principals. We also have a department that has a focus on return on investment and research. But what we truly need is a data dashboard that brings all of that together. So we ask for one more year of approval while we take time to identify and bring to you a data dashboard that's all encompassing. What we need is we need to have return on investment information. We need to be able to use data to determine if research practices are truly being used throughout the district. But more than that, we need a data dashboard that informs not only administrators but teachers day to day relative to the direction of their work. So we've committed to coming together and reviewing those dashboards and bringing you a different product next year.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next order of business is our consent agenda items. Is there a motion to approve our general personnel report?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So our next item on the agenda is the meeting open to the public at this. So before we begin this section of our meeting in which anyone can comment on anything, we say good night to our Cable 2 viewers and thank them for watching. This concludes our broadcast. At this time, we will open the meeting to those who
Thank you for joining us on your school channel, Cable 2.